Trancing in the sheets. It's time for things to change. Hi, my name's Kaz Riley. Welcome back to Trancing in the Sheets. And today we're talking pleasure, female pleasure, sexual pleasure, permission for pleasure, pleasure for everything in life. And today, talking with me, I have the amazing, the sensualist, Freja Njorden, who is just amazing and awesome in every way. Go and check out her site, which I think is the sensualist.org. Is that right, Freya?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
And all her web pages and all that kind of stuff. There's some amazing stuff on there. We did another video called Ejaculation Control about Freya's amazing product for helping men control ejaculation. But today it's the turn of the ladies. We're focusing very much on the ladies and female pleasure. So what an amazing topic, Freya.
Oh, I love this topic. It's so much fun.
It
Of
is,
course.
isn't it? So I see, and I know you see as well, but so many women who, forget the orgasm thing for a while. We often focus on orgasm and inorgasmia or, all that kind of stuff, delayed orgasm. But actually, it runs a lot deeper than that. It's not just about the kind of the explosion somewhere along the line of intimacy or at the end of. This is about just generally being able to enjoy sex, permission for pleasure, permission to receive pleasure, isn't it?
Very much so.
So what kinds of things, what do you think stops women from really allowing themselves to kind of really become immersed in a pleasurable experience?
I think that somewhere along the road in life, they learned that somebody else is more important than they are. And if I could summarize everything into a nutshell, that would be it. And I'll explain that. And that is we have sex for different reasons at different stages in our relationships. And if you tune into the other person and, okay, so is his penis hard? Is he going to get off? Is he becoming aroused at what my body is doing in terms of my appearance, how I'm acting, how I'm demonstrating that I like what he's doing to me, which is usually an act? Then you, when all of these things are in your mind, you're not actually focusing on what feels good at all.
Mm.
And in order for women, in order to feel good or in order to make the most of their pleasure during sex, you have to become extremely selfish. And you have to be having sex in order. Look, there can be a lot of different reasons, such as connecting to your partner and showing him you love him and gifting him something. But if you want to feel pleasure and if you want to feel good, you have to become selfish enough to turn your attention. And we don't have a lot of units of attention. We have like what, 4 bits, like
Mm.
for things, maybe 7 at the most. You have to put those things of attention into your own body. What are you feeling? Making sure it feels good and making sure it's arousing. And they can't do that because their attention is elsewhere and they're used to this sort of like crazy mind thinking about all these other things, taking care of all these details and what about this and what about that, and then somewhere it's gonna, the kids are gonna pop into it. So I got, I rambled for a little bit, but this is what this is why, this is where it stems from.
Absolutely. No, it's very true. I know when, I get a lot of my kind of inquiries from the ladies that I work with. Often it's things like, I want to enjoy sex for me. I want it to not feel that it was the way that I was taught, that it was a kind of a marital obligation, which, in today's world is just a crazy thought. It's not there to keep my partner happy. It's that being able to kind of become, I want it for me. That's kind of what they're saying to me now. And, some of these women are in their 40s, their 50s, their 60s, and they've never had sex for them. It's almost been a thing that's kind of shamed, if you like, or they've been told that they shouldn't do. um, you know, that only sluts enjoy sex. I read that from a client from an inquiry, just this morning. And, I just think that's such a place to be, isn't it? It's because we are sexual beings, just like men. We have these amazing bodies that can do amazing things. And yet, as you say, people become so focused on whether or not it's kind of satisfying their partner rather than it's a satisfying experience for all. and really allowing themselves to just feel, which is it's just fucking amazing, isn't it? When you have really great sex and you allow yourself just to have those experiences and those sensations within your body. But so many women are shut down. You know, it's like they just don't feel those things. How do you help women kind of get back in touch, with those feelings?
Well, there's two different sides to that. One is getting in touch with their primal desire, if
Mhm.
somebody wants to experience that, because primal desire is different than, say, embodied love. Primal desire is really about that, like deep core, pelvic, root, erotic wanting. Um, embodied love activates more of the heart, the chest, the upper head and stuff like that. So if somebody's not able to tune into that, they're not going to experience desire, first of all, and the ability to tune into what they actually want.
Mm,
So they're going to be a passive recipient of what comes their way instead of somebody who actively desires something and chooses to go get it unapologetically.
mm,
So if somebody wants to be able to do that and they can't, well, I figure, well, why not? Like,
mm.
what's in the way of it? And there may be beliefs like, as you said, only sluts like sex, or um, if I do this, then insert the belief system here. There's so many
There's so many, isn't
weird judgments and ideas that people grow up with around women who want sex and who go out and get it. Secondly, so the second part of that is, even if somebody is tuned into their primal desire, and they may not want to be, like, some women don't care for that. It doesn't matter much to them, but they're not able to feel pleasure and they're not able to have sex for them.
Mm,
So in those cases, the focus is on what actually feels good. What feels good enough to arouse my body and keep me in the moment and keep me happy? And I honestly do that as often as I can. And some people aren't comfortable with it, but I try to do that hands on.
mm.
So, in a hands on somatic experimental session where we kind of go over every square inch of her body in all of these different ways, and she realizes, oh, I really like that feeling, or no, I don't. And then how to put that into words so that she can engage with a partner and use her words in a way that somebody else can respond to.
Well, this, I mean, this is the thing as well, that a lot of this is about, I get a lot of women telling me, well, my partner doesn't do it right or he's doing it wrong. And I say, well, do you tell him how to do it right? Do you tell him what you like? Do you tell him what you need? And they go, I couldn't possibly do that. And well, here's the problem. It's not, if you've been reacting in a way, or, and so many women will tell me that they've been faking it, then why wouldn't he believe that that's how you like to be touched or what you want or the things that make you feel good? So it's kind of, at the moment, I think it's very difficult for a man in that situation as well, because he does generally men really want to please women. They want, they
Mm.
want to give pleasure, but they do need that, this is how what works for me. So that so women are taking ownership of their own pleasure rather than a byproduct of giving somebody else pleasure. And I see this a lot where if we're able to do that and women are able to explore and kind of do the the hypnosis kind of suggestion of touch and get to know, or things like you, I know you combine hypnosis and you do body work, hands-on body work as well, which is amazing, because then people get to really feel, and they also get used to, I think, being touched in different ways so that they can understand how their bodies might react and how that might feel, is so important, isn't it? Rather than
Mhm.
just this kind of putting the responsibility on somebody else. We're always talking about taking responsibility, but actually as women, we have to take responsibility for our own experience sexually, isn't it? It's not up to somebody else to give it to us.
It's not up to somebody else to give it to us. And there's this sort of myth that if a man is really the right man, or if he really loves you, or if he's really a good lover, then he is going to do all the right things and you're magically going to feel all the things. And it doesn't work that way. Like it honestly, it doesn't, it cannot work that way. And as long as you have this idea in your head that if he really loves you, he would know how to do it right.
Mm.
There's a lot of romantic notions like words aren't needed. Fuck that. Fuck it. It's so stupid. I can't even believe it. And I think that there are some cases of where there was a lovemaking session that really had like really great chemistry and you didn't even need to speak. You just, everything kind of worked out. Good. That happens every once in a while, but it's not the formula for a long term, fantastic sex life.
No.
And the thing about being touched and the thing about being comfortable with using your words is that you can learn not only what you like, but you can change what you like. You can expand what you like, and you can make your body, let's just say your body has only, out of 100 units, has only one unit of pleasure because you're very controlling and like this one very specific thing feels good. And this is the one thing that can bring you to an orgasm. Maybe if you're aiming for that,
Mm.
if you play with it, if you expand it, if you become more comfortable, if you have more communication, if you start training and conditioning your body with your partner, you can take that one unit to like 85 units. And then more and more and more and more and more things feel good, more things turn you on. You become more responsive. And it's not like, some guy is trying to figure his way through this maze, which can't be figured out because you shut and locked the door and said, you better get through that because I'm not going to shine a light in there. I'm not going to help you. Just get through there and get to my magic spot. And something that you said before in terms of taking responsibility, if it kills the mood for you to have to say what you like, then it's on you to change that.
Mm.
And if you don't, you're always going to be disappointed in sex because men want to please you. And often I've noticed that there's a women will be like, well, I try to tell him to slow down. That doesn't mean anything to a man. What does that even mean? Slow down. So he slows down for a few seconds and he thinks, okay, well, I slowed down. Now I'll just, no, you have to really, really help him. And I'll say here, check out bettymartin.org/videos. If you want an example of what real exploration looks like, she has um, a concept called the Wheel of Consent. And
Mm.
she has a whole bunch of videos and a whole bunch of exercises which take you through every single nuance of learning how to express yourself. So, for example, one exercise I know you're familiar with, but if you lie down on the massage table and it's called the bossy massage, and you say everything you say your partner does for 10 seconds or 30 seconds or something like that. So if you say massage my leg, that means nothing. What do you mean massage my leg? You have to say, take your two fingers and I want you to gently stroke upwards from my Achilles to my knee. So your partner does that for like this. And then if your partner is kind of going like this or something, no. And you explain to them how you want to be touched. And that helps you actually get into your words. And once you train somebody to know your body, less words are needed.
Well, this is it because then they know because they
Yeah.
know rather than they're trying
That's
to guess.
yes. That's what makes a good lover. A good
Absolutely.
lover happens when they have learned how to love your body in the way that you want. Good lovers are not like, oh, well, here's a man and he's a good lover. No. If he happens to be a good lover, usually it's because he's good at listening and
Mhm.
he's been lucky enough to be with women who are able to share with him what they want. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. And there's the flip side to this as well. You know, we live in a world now, quite rightly, where consent is a massive issue. And we can't negotiate consent if we can't use our words. So we can't have it both ways where we're saying, you know, I have to give you my consent if you then can't say what it is that you want to consent to. You know, this is one of the biggest things is all this embarrassment around saying this is what I like, or can we try, or can we do this? You know, is kind of when we want to ask for consent or give consent, we have to use our words. It's not a kind of a Vulcan mind melt that two people have, you know, it's the same thing when we're then learning about somebody's body and how they want to be touched and how we want to be touched, and we can give that. You know, we talk about, wanting to things to happen in a certain way, and they'll say, was he a good lover? And they'll say no. And I'll say, well, did you tell them what you wanted? And they'll say, oh no. Like have, but then they'll get upset when, a man will say to them, this always works. I've never had this problem before. Everybody else is like this. So then you can, we need to be able to say, well, that's not how my body works, and this is what I need you to do to get, because this is how I like it. And actually, if you just leave somebody in the dark, they're just kind of thinking, well, this is what I always do, and now it's not working, so maybe this isn't a good match, when actually it could be the most kind of explosive, chemistry filled match ever. It's
Mhm.
just that nobody's talking to each other, or they're thinking how things should be rather than how things are. I should like to be touched like this rather than this is how I like to be touched, which, but we need to give ourselves permission to kind of ask for those things and then to take them when they're given to us as well. This is the other thing as well, isn't it?
But that's a big thing, and I would ask, everybody, anybody who's listening to this is, what is your permission slip that you need? And this is something to think about, really. What's your permission slip to have good sex?
Mm, yeah.
What is it? What is it? And you'll find when you think about that, there may be a lot of beliefs that come up that are interfering, like, well, if I was in better shape, if I was in better shape, then I could then I would be sexy enough to ask for good sex. All kinds of reasons. Or, if I was 20 years younger, like,
Mm.
I'll hear that one a lot. Like, if I was younger, then having great sex has nothing to do with being young, being fit, being virile, or if you're a woman, being fertile. Nothing's
Absolutely.
pleasure
Absolutely.
is pleasure. You can feel the same pleasure at 90 years old as you can at 60, as you can at, I think, more than when you're younger, because when you're younger, you're just so impatient and
Well, this
explosive.
is the question I always ask when they say that, well, when I was younger, and I was like, well, when you were younger, was the sex amazing? And they'll kind of go, well, if I know what I knew now, it would be. So why not,
Right.
it's like, well, why not give yourself permission now to, have the same enthusiasm, and the same kind of, um, the need to kind of explore and to kind of allow yourself to kind of become immersed in that, but with what you know now and the confidence to be able to say what you need. I mean, what an amazing combination that is.
It's the perfect combination.
But yeah, so often, but we go back to this where, older women don't, as I see a lot of women telling me that, well, I'm postmenopausal. And I know I've said this to you before, and I know you've seen this too, where, women that are saying they've lost the libido because of menopause, when actually, a lot of the time it's not menopause, it's just the time of their menopause is when they've become really stuck in their relationship where, maybe the kids have, gone off to university or have left home, that, people are kind of looking at each other where they haven't been having good sex for a long time, or there's been too much else going on. And, everything gets blamed on hormones. Now, there is some of it, but actually, we know then that often these relationships break down. They meet somebody else, and suddenly they're horny as hell, and they're having great sex, and they're glowing, and they're still postmenopausal. They're still not on HRT. Everything's the same, other than the kind of the environment, the relationship, the kind of desire, or their dopamine levels, I guess,
Mhm.
changes. But we know they were capable of that all along, and that's the thing, isn't it? It's about how we kind of get into ourselves, when we talk about being selfish, but actually sometimes to give, to truly give, which actually our pleasure is a gift, isn't it? To really allow ourselves to really feel that on every level is to actually allow ourselves just to focus on what's going on within our bodies, and how that kind of evolves. And I know this makes some people feel really uncomfortable, to allow ourselves to just be in our arousal. So often we're looking at the end goal of the orgasm or whatever it may be, but actually the process of becoming filled with pleasure and aroused and sexually aroused and really kind of hot is actually a truly amazing process. And women often are trying to get through that to the point where they're able to be penetrated rather than enjoying this whole journey along the way that
Mhm.
actually often is better than any kind of orgasm that you could ever experience. Do you see that too, where, it's like this kind of end goal and the whole process is kind of pushed to one side a little bit? And once people embrace that.
Well, I see it, yeah, I see it big time, and that's because somebody is sorry, I just noticed my computer is not plugged in and I want to plug it in so that it
Okay, cool.
doesn't shut down during our conversation here. Okay. Okay, get there. So there's the fixation on orgasm means that during the entire sexual process of arousal and of playing and of exploration, the mind is in the future instead of the mind being right now here with your body. And that means that a lot of the pleasure that should be happening isn't, because you can't experience now if you're not in the now. And I have to explain that what they're calling orgasm is actually just the release of sexual tension. If you imagine it's like a big bathtub, your body is this vessel and you're filling it up with arousal, and that arousal is sexual tension. So if you're hurrying to get to the what you're calling an orgasm, and some people can come very quickly and some people take a long time, but you're just kind of like frictioning, waiting until you can pull the plug. Why don't you fill up the whole tub and sit there in that heat for as long as you possibly can? Add some essential oils, add some salts, add some all kinds of juicy things to make it amazing, and enjoy it for a long period of time. And you may decide that you don't even want to pull the plug because it feels really good to be in this warmth. I want to keep this arousal, this invigoration, this feeling of aliveness, especially if it's not something that you feel very much of. Like if you're a lower energy person, it actually helps you to keep yourself kind of aroused and then move on with that arousal in your body still. It can invigorate you more than caffeine can or any kind of drug. So
Yeah.
that's one thing. And the other thing I wanted to just throw in there is that whole being selfish, the biggest gift you can give your lover is the gift of your arousal and pleasure. There's nothing better. There's no blowjob, there's no pornographic act that can compare to seeing you in pleasure. There's that deeper gratification that happens, and that's a gift. So that may be the permission slip that you need to be able to be like, oh, so in refusing to focus on myself, I'm actually denying him the thing that he wants most. Yeah, you are. It's very controlling and it fucks you up and it fucks him up too. So stop doing it right now and start
And start enjoying
start
it.
focusing on your body.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. But you see, that there's so much shame, isn't there, attached to those feelings? I think for a lot of women, that starts when they're very young. If they're caught even just kind of, very innocently when it's not even a sexual thing, it's just a pleasurable thing. Parts of our bodies feel pleasurable, rubbing your pubic mound, over your knickers when you're younger. Every girl does that. And they're told not to. They're told that it's dirty, that they shouldn't do that. And that this is where
Mhm.
a lot of these seeds, if you like, are being sowed, right? Rather than rather than even just saying, that's a normal thing to do, but it's something you do in private, for example. It's just putting it into a good place, but people freak out. Parents or grandparents or aunties or whoever kind of witness this kind of freak out. And then that's kind of sowed where when boys do that, it's kind of, everybody laughs, oh, look, boys will be boys. It's that kind of gender difference to how we start to view our bodies in terms of feeling pleasure. And then if we talk about food and all that kind of stuff, we're told that, most of the things that taste really good, often we're told, we shouldn't want those either and they're bad for us. And so in life, just pleasure in general, we're kind of made to feel bad about wanting to experience. It's almost like this kind of, the word hedonist, for example, is seen to be a bad word, not a good word, if you like. And it's that kind of, you're smiling, but it's true,
I
isn't
know.
it? And it's being able to, if we allow ourselves to experience our sensual pleasure, our sexual pleasure, and to be with that, to have that arousal within us. I often talk about libido as life force, and I truly
Mhm.
believe that. Then we start to feel pleasure in other places in our lives as well, which then, in terms of our anxiety, depression, our self doubt, our kind of the procrastination, all of those things start to fade because we're able to experience life in such a feeling kind of way, I guess, isn't it?
If you think about those times, not you, but people who are hung up on these kinds of things, if you think about those times when you were young and when you were innocently, I don't know, say you were straddling a couch and kind of grinding against it, which is a very common thing, or your toy, and somebody said something to you, and there's that feeling in your body, which is almost, it's this shock, it's a shame, it's something like that. That's the feeling that comes up that inhibits what you are going to experience right now. And so, you can do it on your own, but it does help if you see a professional such as Kaz or
Oh,
me.
yeah.
But that's the feeling you want to go back and change. And if you look at that little girl, and if you see her from the perspective as an adult and realize, oh, she could have been taken kindly. Like, you could look at her with compassion and love and warmth and know, okay, she's doing this thing that every little animal does, every single animal on earth. And I'll tell you that even asexual people experience a lot of arousal and pleasure in their bodies. Just because they don't have sexual thoughts and feelings towards others doesn't mean they don't have those same feelings. So everybody does this as normal and natural. And that's where you say those kinds of feelings are best done in your room. They're private for you right now. One day, maybe you may share them with somebody, but
Mm,
so rather than shaming, it's like, oh, here's this nice thing that you're doing. Keep it to yourself. It's private. And you have to reparent that little girl to realize, oh, here's a special, precious little thing that she's experiencing
mm,
that she can feel on her own and not feel any shame over. It's a special thing for her. It's
mm.
beautiful. It's magical. And if you change that feeling of shame in your body into a feeling of magic, then the sky's the limit because you can
Abs-
keep on building it and expanding on it.
Absolutely. And it's that, once somebody really harnesses that pleasure, that kind of pleasure right from that kind of age, even, if we've taken them back as an adult to do that, and then they can start to experience just how sensual the world is, even in lockdown and, with all these restrictions, the world is a truly sensual place, often even more so because we're kind of into ourselves more because of the lack of kind of social interaction, if you like. And, being able to give yourself permission just to kind of be with your own self, if you like, to notice what your body does and how you feel and where you experience pleasure in your body. And even notice that you can start to think about pleasure in a certain part of your body and you can create a pleasurable sensation
Oh,
for it.
yeah.
That I think is really empowering because that then starts to really help people, but women especially, understand that they truly are responsible and can create their own pleasure, and they can share that with somebody else, and they can then have that pleasure enhanced even more, which is just like such an awesome thing, isn't it? When often they're kind of shoving everything down. It's like I shouldn't feel that, or I shouldn't experience that, or my libido shouldn't be higher than my partner's, or only, nice girls don't feel this way. And, oh, I'm a mum, I can't possibly feel this. This is something that I see, with
Mhm.
women that have had children. And it's kind of like, no, absolutely, you should, because you're a sensual, beautiful being. You still have all this amazing energy in your body. And even if it just means when you're really busy that you just notice that it's there, but it's almost like it's so shoved away that they don't even notice when it is there. And we know what happens when we don't notice something. It's as if it's not there. And when women rediscover it again, we help them notice it essentially. They're like, oh my God, I didn't know I could feel this. And wow, parts of my body, can do these amazing things that, I either didn't know they could do, I'd never given myself permission to do, or I'd forgotten that they could do.
Part of that noticing too is giving ourselves permission to think the things and to imagine the things that turn us on, even when right now you're judging them. Because one of the problems is that we really judge our imagination and we
Mhm.
judge our, what I'm going to call the erotic garden or the repertoire of like the wank bank, if you want to call it.
Yeah.
And these are the things that you would imagine, think about, look at, or participate in that arouse you, but that you don't notice they arouse you because the second that you start to think them, or the second you may start to notice that it turns you on, you judge it as being wrong, dirty, unethical. I'm married, so I couldn't possibly want the whole football team to gangbang me. But sometimes people think about that kind of thing and it's arousing. It doesn't mean you want to do it, really. Like, it doesn't mean you actually want to go out and have the team
This
do
is
that
it.
to you. But to think about it could be erotic. And that's the seed of your erotic creativity. And if you can access all of those seeds unapologetically, you have the recipe for arousing yourself at will. You just start to think about those things, your body starts to feel a certain way, and then you can guide it into whatever works for your life. So if you're married and monogamous and you have a fairly limited repertoire of sexual activities and that's good for you, good. What you take is your enormous erotic garden and you channel it into those things.
Um,
Or if you're single and you have multiple partners, then enjoy.
Absolutely. And,
Yeah.
and an erotic garden as well is no different from a normal garden. It needs weeding, it needs watering, it needs planting, it needs to be kind of laid around in the sunshine and enjoyed. It needs everything, it needs nurturing, doesn't it? And looking after. And sometimes we might go in there and prune bits off, but then that allows regrowth. And, but it's to do it all without this judging. It's the judging that's the
Hmm.
problem, isn't it? Of what's okay to think about and what's not okay, and when we get to the point where we're telling ourselves that we shouldn't think something, then of course it makes us think it even more. And then if you've got a belief that you shouldn't think that particular thing, then you get into this kind of spiral of shame, which then starts to, it's like, I guess it's like putting kind of, I don't know, green fly or slugs or something in the garden and it all gets eaten away, doesn't it? And what we want to do is, have huge blooming flowers in there and whatever it is that you want in there, or, and the thing is as well, the landscape changes as we get older. So that what goes in that garden changes as well, isn't it? It's such a huge place where then we've got the place that we can walk down memory lane, but we can also kind of project and think about something that we might like to try that maybe we'd never thought of, or there's something that's going on within a new relationship, or there's a reconnection going on within a present one, or whatever it may be. But if we allow ourselves just to kind of flourish and kind of mop up the sunshine in that erotic garden, then it's giving your body energy in the same way as we walk outside into our regular gardens and soak up the sun or the rain or the wind or whatever it may be. It's just about
Hmm.
feeling everything with every one of our senses. And I think, that's so important, isn't it, when we talk about, that The wank bank is just, and I love that term because it's comical.
It's so funny.
But we all have one. We all have those thoughts, and sometimes they're triggered by something that we see on the TV or something that we read, or just a fleeting thought that passes through your mind when you're cooking dinner. It could be anything, but it's just allowing ourselves to be within our thoughts, isn't it? And just to notice. Again, it's that noticing, isn't it? Just the amazing things that can happen completely privately. It's not that I think people worry about what people will think and what people will notice. And actually, nobody notices anything because it's a internal thing unless we choose and we consent to share it with somebody else. And all we have to do is give ourselves permission to do that. It's not a big ask, really, is it?
Hmm. Well, the problem with not noticing it, or the problem with feeling shame over it, is when you have something in your erotic garden which is arousing to you. And I notice that, at least for myself, I'll get hung up, not hung up, but I'll kind of have themes, and I'll be really, really involved with a certain area of my garden. And that's what I'll think about like all the time for a certain period of times. Then it will run its course and I'll move on to something else, which is interesting to me. And that's kind of how mine works. But if you have something in your erotic garden that's arousing to you and you judge it, and rather than experiencing it, you feel so much shame that you just sort of stuff it away and pretend that it's not arousing to you and pretend that it doesn't exist. And let's just use something very, very non politically correct, but very common. Let's just say the rape fantasy. Okay. I'm using that because it's very uncomfortable to a lot of people. If that's arousing to you and you're like, what is wrong with me that I'm having this desire, and you put it away, what you do is you shut yourself down completely. It's not like you get rid of the fantasy or you get rid of the idea that it's arousing. You just shut yourself down completely and you shut off your ability to become aroused. If instead you can explore it, first of all, you can learn about yourself, you can grow. If it's something that's uncomfortable, you can also explore that too. Because a lot of times I've, for example, in exploring that with women, I've found that women who don't want to take responsibility necessarily will have that fantasy because somebody else is forcing them to do something. And of course, they love it. So it's about not taking responsibility. It's not because you want to be raped. And that's just an example. I'm not
Mm,
categorizing everybody who enjoys that fantasy. I'm just
mm.
saying it's very
No, but
common.
it's a very true one. And of course, the thing that uh, I often point out to women that will tell me that they have that fantasy is actually it's not about it. You're right. It's about not having to be responsible, but also in their mind, even though it's consensual, they kind of want it to happen. So really, it's not even a rape fantasy. It's about being made to do something that really they want to do, but they can't ask for. And that's it's that. And when we look at it
Hmm.
again, it's about not having to take the responsibility for asking what they want. So it's not even about not taking responsibility for the whole act, if you like. It's about not having to communicate, isn't it? Which is an interesting one when you kind of dig a bit deeper. Um, and yeah, so it's back to, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
about giving ourselves permission and asking for what we want and taking responsibility for our own pleasure and understanding how our own bodies work so that we can then share that with somebody else, which but people worry about what people will think. It's the biggest worry in the world, isn't it? Well, what will they think if I ask that? Well, they'll be overjoyed. They would know exactly,
It's like,
what,
oh, thank God I know. Thank God she's asked for something. I can do the right thing. Because people just want to do the right thing during sex.
absolutely.
That's what it boils down
Absolutely.
to. The other stick in there too with that whole rape fantasy, for example, is the idea that somebody desires you so much that they're going to do this heinous act because they just want you so bad they can't control themselves. And as women, we're fed this narrative that the most important thing in the world is to be sexually desirable and beautiful to men.
Mm,
And our worth, like our inherent deep down worth, is often based on our idea of how desirable are we. So we want to be desired very much. And I would say that's something that, look, it's nice to be desired. And of course, we want to be desired by our partner, but you got to do a little bit of work on that. Because if that's what you're basing your self worth on, then you're probably really, really self sabotaging in a lot of different ways.
Mm. Well, the only way to do that, isn't it, is to allow ourselves to see ourselves as desirable people, as in, it's and I mean, the best advice I was ever given actually about this kind of around this kind of area actually was by my grandfather, who said to me, there will be lots of people that will desire you, but very few will deserve you. And that's it. Kind of, it stood me in great stead really all through my life, because it's understanding the difference between doing something because somebody desires it, rather than that kind of place where not only do they desire it, but you feel that they're kind of worthy of that, and that's
Mhm.
self-worth. It's having the self-worth to, again, say what you want, isn't it, and say what you don't want. And it's something that I tell my clients a lot. It's not necessarily about just being able to have sex. Especially the clients that I have that really don't function sexually at all. It's about somebody, you feeling somebody is worthy of you having sex with them as well, and they're kind of like, oh right, and it's so true, isn't it? And it's
Yeah.
that it's and we need to help women kind of get over that. If either I have to do it because he desires it, or that the only way they can be desirable, or they can get what they want, or they can be deemed to be desirable, is to kind of putting up with crap sex. Is kind of just going through the motions because that's what somebody desires. And when actually that's where the biggest kind of miscommunication takes place, because more often than not what somebody desires is to share that space, that energy with somebody, and to
Mhm.
give them pleasure, for them to feel the desire, or for you to feel the desire as much as they do. And that's the bit where it's kind of all gone a bit wonky and wrong, I think.
Well, men, and look, I'm using men and women because it's easier. So I'm not excluding people by saying men, but in this dynamic, men are going to have, let's just call it that crappy sex that you're talking about. They're going to put up with it because it's the only thing that they can get. And so they're putting up with it too. They don't know how to please you. You're placating them. You're kind of going through the motions. You're not giving them the correct feedback that they need to be a good lover. And that's all they can get. So they're taking the scraps and they're going with it. And I have not had, in all of the years I've been doing this work, when I've worked with couples and the woman has said, he's no good in bed, he's selfish, he doesn't listen to what I want. And she always thinks he's selfish. And I've never once met a man who actually didn't want to please her and who wasn't just like desperately, well, I'll take what I can get, but I feel like shit. They don't like it either.
No, no. And often they're just doing what they think would turn somebody on, because that's what they've seen or they've heard, or that's what women have told them does, or they've just kind
Mhm.
of, so they've not been given that feedback. They've not, that communication hasn't happened. And this is why, people sometimes get really angry with me when I say you have to take responsibility for your own pleasure. It's about somebody giving it to you, but you have to tell them how to do that. And this idea, movies have got a lot to answer for, where the waves are crashing and this person knows exactly how to touch a person, please a person, go down on a woman, whatever it may be, knowing that everybody's completely different. And we need to get away from this kind of I don't know how to describe it, this kind of almost like, you will inherently know, somehow it's in the genes, how to please me, when actually, often they don't even know how to please themselves. I know a lot of men that are, they'll talk to me about the women that they've been with, and they ask the question even, how do you like to be pleased? And these women genuinely have no idea. They don't know.
And
and that,
they'll say, "Oh, I like everything.
yeah,
Whatever you want to do."
yeah,
Well, I want to do what feels good to you. Well,
we
I like everything.
usually do, yeah, you know, it's that kind
Like,
of, so you know, so that you know, permission for pleasure truly comes, I think, from within, doesn't it? You know, it's about, as like you say, writing that permission slip, but knowing what's on it, because often women don't know what's on it,
Mhm.
and then having the courage to not only give that to ourselves, but then to let other people in on what's on that slip, and also to look at theirs. And actually, often we can be surprised. You know, it's not necessarily about meeting your marital duty, or you know, even things like women will say, well, you know, I want to learn how to orgasm because my partner's disappointed when I don't. And it's like, well, it's your orgasm, you know, it's that kind of, so when it does come even down to the orgasms, it's about, how about if you really want to orgasm, that you do that for you, and actually he can share in that experience. But how about, you know, being able to communicate that actually for you it's not a big deal if you orgasm or not. You know, it's not his sexual kind of performance isn't judged about whether or not you orgasm or not. It's about how you
Yeah.
feel. And you know, that's all got lost somewhere along the line, which is just a crying shame, really. But hopefully things are changing. That's what we want. We want
I
things
think
to
that, yeah,
change.
things are changing, and the first step, really, even though it's a little bit of a frustrating step, is realizing that it's not good enough for me. Something has to change, and we're saying it's got to be you.
Absolutely. And I think that that's a good place to kind of pause. You know, I'll be having you back on here countless times.
I love it.
Because you know, because you're just such an amazing and full of information and experience. So tell people where they can find you. So it is, your website is,
It's www.thesensualist.org. And that's really the best place to see what I do. It's the best place to contact me. I am on Facebook if you want to see me. But if you're going to ask me questions about this, it's better to go through the contact form and get in touch that way.
cool. So also, I know you've got some big projects coming up, and when they're released, we'll pop the link in down below for when you're ready with all of those. But thank you so much for coming on and talking about permission for pleasure. It's always a pleasure to talk to you and to hear all the amazing things that you've got to say. So thank you so much for coming on Trancing in the Sheets, for talking about permission for pleasure.
Always a pleasure, Kaz.
And if you want to get hold of me, you can get hold of me at sexualfreedomhypnosis.org, for training.com, for client sessions. We've got the Mind Spiral with all the kind of crazy hypnosis apparel that it's just a lot of fun. You know, we need permission for pleasure to have fun with just our clothing sometimes. And you can catch me on Insta and all those things with the handle at Trancing Sheets. Thank you so much. Don't forget to subscribe, ring the kind of ding dong bell so that you'll know when I've uploaded something. And I look very much forward to speaking to you again next time on Trancing in the Sheets. Thanks for tuning in. Trancing in the Sheets. It's time for things to change.